Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory. Today we have Dr. Carlos Rivera on our show. We've had Dr. Rivera on the show several times talking about his case and what went wrong. But today it's going to be a little bit different. We have with us his attorney, Judith Powell of Jericho. And Carlos has sort of made this his life's mission to bring awareness to parental alienation and what's wrong with the system to try to prevent what happened to him from happening to other people. And now we're going to get the perspective from his attorney to see what went wrong in his case to hopefully prevent other people from going through the same problems. And then we're going to talk about where he's at right now and about getting his life back on track. So welcome to the program,
Thank you very much.
Judy and Dr. Carlos. First, I just want to recap just really quick for the people who haven't seen the case on Dr. Carlos, which they can find on Facebook. He had a marriage several years, got divorced, signed a ridiculous agreement under duress, where there was this amount of child support and spousal support that he couldn't possibly maintain. But because he wanted to do the right thing, or he thought was the right thing by his family, he took the advice of his attorneys and signed the agreement to get it over with, figuring, okay, I'll do the best I can. He did the best he can. Some years he paid over $100,000 in a year, but still fell short because he couldn't pay approximately 85% of his pay and ended up being sentenced to 6 months in jail. That's the very, very short version of what happened. There's plenty of other shows out there that you can see to see what happened. So let me ask Judy, because Judy is the first person. Carlos has had several lawyers, and Judy is the first person that actually took his case and took a holistic approach, because when we've been speaking with Dr. Carlos, what we found is that every lawyer he went to took the case from that day and then looked forward at the current problem that he was having. It doesn't seem like anybody ever looked back to see from the beginning what's going on here. How did he get into this mess? What went wrong with his case?
I think part of what went wrong was, like you said, the other lawyers had not gone back to day one. And in order to understand a case, you, in my opinion, have to start what happened on day one. You have to look at all those documents, and I always feel you need to know your client's case very well, or else you're walking into court and you're arguing just what someone else argued. There's nothing new. Go back to day one, understand the whole case history, and that brings you to today. And I've spoken with Dr. Rivera about that. It's like treating a medical patient. You just can't look at what the other doctor did. You have to go back to what happened with this patient's condition. The same way I'm looking at his case from day one, and I started to see all these things that went wrong, and everybody just kind of went off what the last person did and never went back to the beginning.
Now, somebody looks at it, you go to a lawyer, and he's a professional, he's got an education in medicine, practicing 20 years as a pediatrician, and in speaking to Dr. Carlos, he always said, look, I hired these lawyers, I paid them very good money, they're the experts. Who am I? I've never been divorced before. So was he wrong in signing? I mean, what could he do if a lawyer puts a paper in front of him and says sign it, or says, look, this is the best you can get? What can he do?
It's essential, I think, for any client to really know their case, to really, when a lawyer puts something in front of you, what is this? Explain this to me. The lawyer really has to take the time, and the client has to be willing to listen. What am I signing? And listen to your lawyer when they say, this is what this means. And you don't just sign an agreement. You go through that agreement with your client page by page, line by line. And I tell them that all the time. We will sit down and we will go over it. We will go over every single document so you can understand what is going on. It's your case, it's your life.
I think a lot of times, when people go to a doctor, and I'm using your doctor analogy because but they always say, you need an advocate, because if you're going in for cancer treatment, and especially you're on medication and you're not thinking clearly, you've never been through this before, you don't know if it's, you can't even think, especially going through a divorce. You're in one of the worst times of your life. You don't even want to talk about it. So I think it's a difficult, and I'll let Carlos comment on that.
If I could, I think that, Judith brought up some big points that I wanted to go over. One of the first things is that, like you said, I have my expertise and attorneys have theirs. So when I went to this position, you're already frightened, you're nervous. And one of the analogies I think is like, I wouldn't expect people to come to my office and to understand how to treat their own ailment. You know, and in some cases, if I had something serious, God forbid cancer, something like that, I wouldn't know how to treat it. Nor would I just say, if a doctor told me, okay, well, take 4 aspirin 3 times a day and you'll be fine. It's like, really? Okay, let me move on. So with this, I had the faith of a child, and the attorney's like, listen, this is emotionally horrible. There's quite a bit going on. What do I do? And to go from there, one of the points that Judith had brought forward was that every attorney that I've had 5 attorneys, and each one starts with, did you have a lawyer when you signed this? And it's like, yes, I did. Actually, my attorney wrote this. And then they usually start off with, well, if I was representing you, this would have never happened. And I was like, okay, well, I can't fix what happened. What do we do from this point on? And everyone just had this shrug their shoulders kind of approach, like, well, let's try this, let's try that. And I was relieved when I first met Judith in her office, in that she actually dissected it and went back. So my life has been a series of like, well, something must have happened, because look, you ended up in jail and this, that, and the other thing happened. And when you look back, it really needed to be handled properly from the beginning. And that's one of the things that I try to explain to people now. Like, you really have to ask what's going on. Like you said, your attorney has to be willing to speak with you and explain things to you, so you don't end up in these positions like, my God, like, how did I get here?
But Judy, does the judge have any responsibility? I mean, I looked at his case. I'm not a lawyer. I said, there's no way this guy could pay this. So does the judge have a responsibility, or they say, you got a lawyer, I'll sign off on whatever you want? Do they have a responsibility?
The unfortunate thing is, in the area of law, where medicine and law is very different. In medicine, there's specialties. You're a pediatrician, you're an obstetrician. In law, we don't necessarily specialize. We go to law school, we graduate, and we say, except for with very few exceptions, this is what I want to do, or I'm going to do this. And I could practice 50 different kinds of law, and whereas he's a pediatrician, he can't be an obstetrician, he can't be a dentist. So the judges, they have 2 lawyers. It doesn't matter if it could be 2 real estate lawyers. As long as there's the names of 2 lawyers on an agreement, I don't think they really look at it.
Okay.
I do think that there is a judicial responsibility, but I don't think there is. It's done that way.
Because as a layperson, I would say, going into it, you know what? And he's saying, I'm a good guy. You know, I love my children. I have a great practice. I'm a hard worker. I supplied for my... Nothing bad's going to happen to me. He wanted to take care of his children. And I think you go into that thinking that the judge isn't going to let anything bad happen to me. The right thing happens, but the right thing doesn't always happen in family court, does it?
Unfortunately, it does not happen, and I really wish there was a way that things were run better in the family court system in Long Island and, you know, the 5 boroughs, which is where I've experienced, but it's just not run very well at all, and people are not treated properly. Clients, litigants are not treated well sometimes, and again, the judges and the support magistrates, whoever are in charge of the case, are often not very knowledgeable. And the same thing with the matrimonial part of Supreme Court. It's where we get the newest judges. If a judge is elected to the Supreme Court, they're almost always going to start in the matrimonial part.
Okay.
And then when they have a certain amount of experience, they get out of that, might be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and they move as fast as they can to the whole rest of Supreme Court, which incorporates everything else but matrimonial. So whereas they established this IAS system where you're supposed to have 1 judge through your case, we can have 1, we could have 2, we could have 3, we could have 4. You can go through many different judges, and they come and go. Within the matrimonial part, it's almost that the newest judges, the least experienced judges, are the judges doing divorces.
Which is crazy. That's somebody's life.
Well, the thing is, you're having, in the matrimonial law, you're having the people least experienced in the court system.
Right.
In other areas of law, commercial law, where you have people who have been in court, you're having people least experienced in the court system, just regular people. And also the most important thing is being litigated, the most important thing in the entire world, which is children. What's more important than that? A contract about a house, you know, a car accident? Nothing's more important than children.
And if you make a mistake in a contract, you could always fix it down the road. You can't fix a child issue.
Right, so we're having the newest judges sitting in the matrimonial part.
Now this is going to lead into my next question, but I want to ask Dr. Carlos, having all this that has happened to you, what has this done to your life personally? I mean, you sit here and you go out and you advocate for everybody and you help people, and I mean, it's just tireless. I don't even know where you get the energy. You did a walk from Montauk to, you're almost to Manhattan, and you're taking calls from people who are suffering from depression. I mean, I just see all these things. You never say no to anybody. But what has this done? And you put a good front up, but what has this done to you personally?
It's devastating. At first you try to, there's the humiliation part of it, and emotional part that you're breaking up. No one ever looks for their marriage to end. And it went from sadness to devastation quickly. Everything I worked for in my life was destroyed and lost. And that I was able to deal with. Okay, I can move on from that. Missing the children, that's become a very, very hard part. And I had the standard formula of Wednesday dinners and every other weekend, but you look at that and it's 3 hours one week and then a weekend the other. And then by the time you look at it, you never see your children, even if things are going well. And that was the hardest part. And there's quite a few times where just, you have difficulty moving through the sorrow. I can't tell you how many times I pulled over my car in tears, like, okay, God, if you're trying to teach me something, I learned it, please let up. And one day I decided to take that and say, okay, listen, we got to push forward. I can't keep saying, I'm a good guy. What do I do to deserve this? You have to help people, because maybe this is a mission I never wanted. And I plan to write a book, and I think that the working title is going to be A Path I Never Chose, or A Path I Would Have Never Chosen. And the truth is, I have to turn that pain into do something for someone else. And that's what I've done. And there's people who've been inspirational to me, yourself and your work, and Judith's work has restored my faith in humanity, and that good people actually exist. Lost that faith. So, excuse me. So I'm trying to turn it around and do something good with it. And there's people who turn to me now and they're saying they're having a tough time. It's like, I could see why. So, recently I started something with, I'm looking to do a support group for people who are affected by parental alienation, grandparents, parents. I'm doing this walk to try to help people, because most people don't understand what parental alienation is. And there was something I saw posted once on social media that said that, parental alienation is a term you don't understand. It's like cancer until it happens to you. And that couldn't be more true, that the pain of what you experience, the pain of missing a child is unbearable. It's simply, I really feel it's the most inhumane punishment that anyone could impose on somebody.
I think you once told me I'd rather go to jail anytime than have this happen to my kids.
Absolutely.
And jail sucked because you spent 6 months there.
Jail's a harsh show. I look back on jail. It's funny because they came out to show that orange is the new black. And I suppressed the memories, like being in jail, the bathroom and toilet conditions were unbelievable, and just the loss of a sense of hope. And I tried to push that and move on, and then a TV show will pop up, and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how much I absolutely hated that when I was there.
You'll still take that over what happened to...
Oh, in a heartbeat. I'll do it again tomorrow. I would do the 6 months again tomorrow, as opposed to, ever having to sit with someone whose child doesn't speak to them anymore, or being restricted from being able to see your own child. It's horrible.
I think one of the things that maybe this happens to it happens to doctors a lot, because I think when I was talking to Judy for the show prep, and I said, maybe because he's a doctor, people say, you know what, he's a rich doctor, he could stick up for himself, and
yeah.
You're almost not a human being. You make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, people call you doctor, and then Judy pointed out, you know what, it happens to lawyers too. We forget, listen, a lot of lawyers are pieces of shit, we could say it because it's cable, but a lot of lawyers, but you know what, there are some very good lawyers out there, and you know what, they're still human beings, and
yes.
Let me tell you, if a lawyer loses their children, it's painful.
It hurts just as much.
They have a heart too. So.
It doesn't matter what you do. I was incarcerated with people that were blue collar. There were construction workers, bankers, business owners. And the truth is that doesn't even factor in what your occupation is, the level of income you make. it's all relative. There is nothing to compare to. Your children are priceless. So it doesn't matter what you do. And I think that in some cases there's so much prejudice out there that for me it's just like, oh, he needs to pay child support and then that's the end of it. It's
And you never said you didn't.
Yeah, and it's just like, if you look at the paperwork, you could see how much money went that way. And to this day, I don't care about that. I really don't care about how much money is needed to take care of my children. It became like, how do you get penalized when you don't make enough? Does any person who can't afford a car payment or a mortgage payment deserve to go to jail for 6 months and then have their whole life turned upside down? And let me tell you something, when you come out of jail, everyone thinks that money is wiped clean. It's not. So I was getting bills in jail for $225,000, and I would laugh. I would
As you don't have a job because you just lost your practice.
It was always like I could write a check in jail. I'm not allowed to have pens or pencils, but I can write a check in jail. So
The laugh is not a funny.
No, and I would tell.
It is laughable because it's unbelievable.
That's what makes it funny. It's like, it's surreal. So I would tell the other inmates I was in there with, I was like, does anybody want to see what a $225,000 bill looks like? And no one could believe it. And then when you get out, your ability to move forward, it's worse than when you started.
I think you mentioned that just the fact that you went to jail, people say, rebuild your practice, that other doctors don't want to talk to you because you have like this scarlet letter that this guy went to jail, and there's got to be something more to it. So.
I might as well had a combination of like leprosy and Ebola because there's people I had wonderful relationships with. It just, everyone's distant. There's just this.
Because people who aren't, I think, can't believe it. They said there must be more to the story.
They can't, and they don't want to be associated with anything negative, so they steer clear of me. But I've had an unusual luck in that, while it's been crazy at some points, I take care of some of the absolute most wonderful people ever. And I think that one of the things that happened to me was that I was always blue collar. So I grew up in a poor family, and I always treated people like friends that I happened to took care of the children, because it's a big trust in me, and it always meant the world to me. And these people, when everything went south, they were there for me. Talk to any other physician that gets ousted for a practice, doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and blue collar people put together $170,000 to help. A lot of that actually went to my my divorce agreement. But the truth is that was like a Cinderella story. And even through jail and after jail, these people stuck with me. So I'm grateful for that, and that's a wonderful thing, but I think I'm the exception. Had I been a blue-collar worker, had I been a manager at, name it, a manager in a Target, a manager in, there's not even Arby's anymore, McDonald's, those people have nowhere to go. So I have the benefit of having people with me and support me that I look after. But like, what happens to the regular guy? This is when you need your attorney to look out for you. And thank God that I came, our paths crossed, because I lost hope. I was just like, well, I'm just going to have to ride this out and see what happens. This is going to be a terminal illness for me. So I have hope now. But in the end, no matter what happens to me, it's what I'm able to do. If I could steer somebody away from this, then it was worth it.
I know when we spoke and you showed me your case and you said, Gary, I don't know what to do. I owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. I lost my practice. My kid's relationship is destroyed by the court. I don't know what to do. And I looked at it and I said, man, I don't want to say it, but it's hopeless. I don't know which way to turn. And then Judy found some things. But what are you doing? He's in such a mess. Now you're broke, so you can barely afford an attorney. When you're all done, what can he do? I mean, his life, he's lost his practice. He can't get back to 6 months in jail that he spent. His relationship with some of his children is messed up. The ones that it's good, they have issues because their father was in jail. Nobody likes to see that.
They were
what can we do is there hope for his case to fix this?
Well, we're working on that. We've fortunately successfully defended it. The wife had come back, ex-wife had come back and attempted to bring the matter back into family court again, and that was after a certain amount of litigation. She withdrew that, and now we're pushing on, and it's a battle, and we're trying to get certain things changed, and hopefully there will be at some point a good outcome for
Is there
them.
no common sense? I mean, maybe this is a little naive to me, but to me, if you would just go to a court and say, Your Honor, look, this man just wants to earn a living, go on with his life. There's no way he could pay this ridiculous debt that you've thrown upon him. You've punished him. People get out of jail for doing ridiculously worse things. There's nothing you can do like this. There's no easy fix.
There's no easy fix, and there's no humanity in Unfortunately, they're just litigants.
But you see what happens to him. His life is
but
destroyed.
It's just another litigant. At the end of the day, the courtroom door shuts, everybody goes home, has dinner, and Carlos Rivera is forgotten. He's just another litigant who came through that day. You're not supposed to care about that, about him as a human being. And I personally cannot separate that. I'm an attorney, I'm representing him, but he's still a human being to me. And the court system, that the whole humanity is gone, and the whole what makes sense. There's no obligation.
Do the judges just lose their set? I mean, what happened? Just seeing all this misery all day, they just lose their, I mean, they got to be human beings because they have families.
They separate themselves. People are capable of totally 100% separating themselves. And if you do care, then they say to you, well, you're taking on, the cliche is you're taking on the persona of your client. No, I care about my client.
Right.
But because they are people.
Right.
And we can't forget, this is a man, this is a human being. His children are children. He loves his children. Just like if you have children, you love your children, and I love my children. He is a man, he's a parent who loves his children just as much as anyone else, and that is not a consideration.
One of the things I think I'd have to add to that is that I don't think a single attorney ever went to law school saying, I can't wait to screw over people and make my living that way. I don't think it starts out that way. I think there's a love of the law, and then you want to help people. What happens in between? Who knows? It's almost like the Rainmaker. I like that little dialogue he has in the middle of that movie. It's a movie about a lawyer. But, in my case, I never, went to medical school thinking like, oh, I can't wait to collect copays and go to it doesn't work that way. And I think that you look at my experience, there's been a lot of anecdotal stories I've come across. And one story that stood out quite a bit when you were asking Judy that last question was I was incarcerated with someone that, blue collar worker, ran out of, he hit hard times, but then he started working again after Hurricane Sandy, and now is paying, but he was behind. So he finds himself in court, $3,000 short, and his ex-spouse decided, well, he doesn't have the money here, I want him incarcerated for $3,000. So now he speaks up in court against the judge, which we all know we're supposed to stand there and be respectful, not say anything. He says, does this make sense to anybody in this room? I now have work, I'm catching up on payments, and I'm going to now lose the work, I'm going to be in a worse situation. And by arguing with the judge, she said, what makes sense to me? Now you have to pay $4,000, and instead of 30 days in jail, you get 45. And I was like, what kind of unopposed power is that? It's like, I get insulted, here and there, and it's like, I can't take it out on somebody. It's like, well, now your kid doesn't get medicine because you just insulted me. In the old days, doctors used to say, smile big and charge double if somebody was challenging. So now I look at like how, the intimidation and how they can actually just on a whim decide what they want to do and how harsh they're going to be to you. It's like, these are the things that need to be regulated, and I'm a strong supporter of, I believe we need cameras in courtrooms.
Absolutely.
There has to be some type of regulation or some kind of, it has to conform and be semi-uniform across the states, because there's no shortage of horror stories in court.
Like you said, you went to every lawyer and they said, well, I would have done this, I would have done this. The reality is none of them are really wrong, because there is no black and white thing, because every judge does something differently. They come into it with personal feelings. They have relationships with attorneys. So there is no I don't see that there's a black and white way to handle every case.
There are uniform formulas for child. There is one for child support. There is one for divorce pending, while the divorce is pending. There is one that has passed the legislature, and as far as I know, not signed by the governor yet, that is supposed to be post-divorce, during divorce and on, for spousal support. I don't think the formulas are good, because in the very end they don't take into account how much the person actually has left. Right. All right, we'll give you this, and according to the formula, you'll get this in child support, and you'll get this in spousal support. But they never look at what's the bottom line.
Right, no,
and the formulas don't require that. And on top of that, the judges still have the option to deviate from the formulas pretty much whenever they want. So they do the formula, and then they say, but we're going to make him pay that amount, or we're going to make her pay that amount. And they don't look at, this person no longer can afford to live.
That's key, especially on Long Island. I mean, if you're living upstate and you're still left with $1,000 a month, all
You
right,
can live.
you can live. But on Long Island, you know, if you're making $40,000 a year and you have 3 kids and you have to pay spousal support and child support, well, now you can't live.
Which is another problem. You can't do a uniform rule with a cap of 141,000 for capping the mathematical formula for support, combined income. You can, that might make sense upstate somewhere, but in Manhattan, it certainly doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, you have to look at, and I think the issue is what the expenses of the person with the child are, is because if you have a house, for example, that has no mortgage, and now you're giving that person 30-something% of your pay between alimony or spousal support and child support, well, they're living like whoever's got the kids in that house living like a king, and you're living, I don't know where you live because you can't even rent an apartment anymore. So everything needs to be like holistic and a common sense, which is certainly what didn't happen in his case. There was no common sense. Now, there's a thing called law guardians or attorneys for the children. And sometimes people will come to me and say, well, the good thing is the judge just appointed a law guardian for the case, and they're going to do what's best for my children. And the father will say, which is, of course, having both parents in their life. And the mother will say, well, of course, having me have custody and them seeing the kids less. What's the deal with these law guardians?
Well, we have changed the name for several years
Attorneys
ago
of
for the attorney for the children. Their role is supposed to be not to advocate for the best interests of the children, but to advocate for what the children's wishes.
I don't understand. What if the kid's 4 years old?
Well, never mind that.
Even 13 years old.
I've had law guardians appointed on cases where a child is 6 months old.
Now, we're down to the last minute, and I want to help other people. First of all, what can somebody do? There's people watching this show now because they're going to Google it and see, I'm in a distraught situation. I've been through 5 attorneys. I'm dead broke. I owe hundreds of thousands of dollars, more money than I could ever make in my lifetime. What do they do?
I think the first thing they have to do is go to the many courts. It could be family court, it could be district court, it can be Supreme Court. All the different courts that they've been to, gather all their papers and start reading. And start making notes just like a lawyer would, and start reading and make a timeline. What happened on this day, on this day, on this day, and make a timeline, because things will start becoming clear to them. And if they go to a lawyer, then it's that much less work the lawyer has to do. And that
Less work is less money.
Less work is less money.
Right. Well, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. Like I said, you're taking this personally. It's easy to say, you know what, this guy's done, because this, for example, Dr. Carlos, this is a tough case. It's so deep into it. He's been through with so many attorneys. Where does he go now? And what I wanted to, Dr. Carlos, what happened to you shouldn't happen to anybody. So, I mean, if you just look in the camera, if you could talk to the judge, because hopefully they're watching it. What did this do to your life and your children who are going to watch it? Tell everybody, what did this do to you as a human being and as a father?
I think this was a travesty beyond description. There's some things that I can't find the words for, and this would be one of them. And I would hope that any attorney or any judge looking at this truly look at it. You can't approach things with a jaded look and make assumptions and cliches. Each story is different, the facts are important, and these lives are affected. And what happens to the adults is one thing, but the long-term effects it has on the children is devastating. And I think that's one thing that we forgot. We forget about the children that are alienated, the children that are affected by divorce, and how the cycle perpetuates. This is something that we could fix in our lifetime. We could make things better. And I want this to be a situation where we look back on this in horror, that we can't believe that this happened. And my goal right now is to help people. And I hope and pray that my efforts, your efforts, Judy's efforts, will ask people to stand up and speak out, go past the intimidation. And try to do something.
Okay, thank you both for being on the show. For more information on Dr. Carlos, you can go to Facebook. It's probably the best way.
Sure, March for Awareness.
Dr. Carlos Rivera, type in Dr. Rivera, March for Awareness. There's a lot of information out there. Judith Powell out of Jericho, New York. I'm Gary Jacobs, and thank you for joining us on Long Island Backstory.